I must say, before we go any further, I've been so proud of the work you've been doing. I'm so proud of you and on the four pipe and everything, just the glow up. Keep on inspiring us, keep on pushing.
Dumelang kaofela, ke amogela kaofela. Nna ka lebitso ke nna Dr. Moyo, and I would like to welcome you to another installment of Lesedi podcast. Today we have a beautiful guest by the name of Gogo Khanyakude. Gogo has an amazing journey, an interesting one, and this is what he had to say. So how's it, Gogo?
Gogo, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, and yourself?
I'm awesome.
Nice to have you on. You are my very first guest for Lesedi podcast.
That's actually very interesting. I'm always excited to get involved in projects where we come together as Sangoma and we share of our experiences, because this life is from experience. There's no manual for Ubungoma.
Right, not at all, because you get quickly reminded that you don't know as much as you think you know. So ask a friend.
Definitely. I must say, before we go any further, I've been so proud of the work you've been doing. I'm so proud of you and on the four pipe and everything, just the glow up. Keep on inspiring us, keep on pushing.
Thank you so very much, Kalaboga, and I definitely receive. To get on to today's conversation, we're going to be talking about mental health issues, especially for the people that are embarking on their spiritual journeys. So we know famous people like the likes of our very own Trevor Noah, Ifani, Lala Hiramaya. Those people have publicly disclosed that they struggle with mental health issues. But when you look at them from a distance, those people are thriving. You would never ever tell. So mental health issues deal with the kinds of depression as well as anxiety, where you feel like you don't amount to much in life, or you don't feel like you don't have anything to live for. I'd like to ask you, Gogo, would you feel like you're someone who struggles with either of the two?
In all honesty, when it comes to my mental state, I'm very much cognitive of who I am. I relate a lot with myself. I spend a lot of time listening in, like I tell. So also growing up as an only child and someone who lives in my head, I'm very easy to pick up when there's a shift in my head space, and I then am also very expressive. So when it actually comes to things such as depression or mental issues, there are stress factors of life that go on. But generally, I'm a happy-go-lucky person, and I'm fortunate in the sense that I haven't struggled from mental issues. But this is post-Twasa. But pre-Twasa, I was convinced I was going crazy. That is what led me ephetweni. I was definitely sure that the bipolar condition that runs in our family has now caught up with me and I am going crazy.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. So you feel that you undergoing your spiritual journey also helped you heal with the stresses that you had or the conversation that you kept with yourself before Utwasa?
I believe for me now, having some experience working as a spiritual counselor and a mentor and a coach, because we do a lot of African indigenous approaches to working with the psyche. I mean, the moment you become Gobela, a lot of the work that you're doing is actually not working so much on the spirit, because the spirit is autonomous. It does what spirit does, what it will. but it's working with the psyche and the ego of the person. Is that what I've found is that what leads a lot of people to having mental issues or mental stresses is the struggle to actually let go to the natural rhythm of life. It's having a certain kind of an expectation when it comes to how life is supposed to be. It's basically living inside a box. And then once you're in that box, it has expectations and it has perceptions, and all of that form part of what you think is your character and your persona. But we are not limited and bound by our character and our persona, because that is an identity we build over the experiences that we have had. So a lot of mental illnesses in the beginning, apart from the ones that have to do with chemical imbalances, have to do with the concept of people not being able to accept and to let go and to surrender at most times.
No, I can definitely relate to that and understand what you're talking about. Have you found that in your practice, like, is there a specific kind of clientele or a certain kind of profile of a client that you get to be met by in Dumbin?
I think, to be honest, for me, I mean, I live a very dual life because of the nature of my family and my parentals. I have two mothers as opposed to one. So back home in Mpumalanga, my mom lives there, and when she's there, it's in a township area, but it's in what, even in township standards, they call the suburbs of Kokasi. When I'm in Pretoria, I also live in the suburban area. My upbringing and my exposure has always then exposed me to being at a certain middle class level, and maybe then even have access to higher than that. So if I'm honest, the people that generally come to me from a socioeconomic perspective are those from the middle class and are those from a higher class than that. And I believe also what it has to do with is that people that come from the rural background also, they are not impressed by us Gogos that speak like this and do this kind of work. So there isn't a resonance. Whereas those who are often in the middle class are those who are Christian, those who maybe even then have gone through a whole lot of westernization in terms of even their cultural understanding. So to them, it's a comfortable space to come into the traditional space when you have someone who's competent in speaking English, who understands all of the worldly concepts, and then can still relate it to the traditional. So it's as though you act as a bridge between the two worlds. And in terms of an age group, I wouldn't say that there's a set age group that generally comes to me. But if I had to try and maybe put it, it would be anything from your 23-year-olds going right up to people who are in their 60s, because healing is so diverse. You go back to Simbokoko.
And with that particular group of people that you do speak to, can you maybe identify maybe two topics or two specific categorizations that you can put them in terms of the type of help these people reach out to you for?
So in terms of, in all honesty, a lot of the middle class people and those who are in, as I've spoken before, when they come in, it's always identity yabo, and there's a disconnect with their ancestry. And when there's a disconnect with your ancestry and a disconnect with your spirituality, it means that immediately there's also a disconnect with yourself and your identity. So a lot of them come in seeking to reconnect with who they are, where their origins come from, and they are often then also then led into the space by their ancestors who have been for a long time trying to get their attention. So I could say that a lot of the work that I do is around reconnecting people with their ancestors, teaching people around the importance of indigenous practices and certain customs and practices that go with it in terms of rituals and ceremonies and coming just how to live as an African in African soil. Because what often then happens is that somebody could have everything seemingly together on a material front, but their lives generally don't have meaning, and there's always these afflictions that keep on going on. There isn't a permanence. Secondly, what would also then be a typical thing is that, as much as I don't really like to accept it, is people come through and it's and that's also the other dimension, is a lot of people that are called come into the space. And it doesn't mean that in both of those categories, whether it's people looking to reconnect with their identity and their familial practices, or the people coming in for the callings that they have in order to initiate, that there isn't physical healing that needs to be done. Because when you're spiritually afflicted, what people do not understand is that spirit, when you're in misalignment with it, there's a certain vibration that it vibrates within your life, and it will manifest also on a physical level. So you could find that the people who are not rooted with their identity will struggle with permanence, such as in relationships, will struggle with things such as inextricable headaches, and will have certain issues perhaps with women with their womb, because that's the source of their creation. With men, they'll have issues that maybe center around, their sexual reproductory organs, because that's all part of your identity, the seed. So there is also physical work that has to do with Inyanga, umuntu, using umuti to heal them. But a lot of what, to honestly speak the truth, is that what seems to be manifesting now is that we as an African people are spiritually ill. And it manifests in other ways, but it's a spiritual illness and a hunger and a misplacement that often brings people into the space and the practice. Towards Gogo.
That's absolutely right. I mean, absolute agreement with you, because we don't realize the depth of Ingulo yetu. Everyone wants to round it off to the nearest denomination being Intwaso, but that's also, it takes on a life of its own. But Nakona, how can I help you if I haven't helped you with the reconnection of identifying who you are as an individual? I know there's a project that you are busy with, your baby, Uguloza, which is about indigenous knowledge systems. Can you please tell me about that project and how it came about? What made you get out of your way to be able to start having this conversation?
So I believe with Uguloza, it's something that I registered the company in 2017, and I had come back from initiation in 2014. And over those 3 years, because I got initiated Emakaya. So Emakaya, people are generally in the pulse of the beat as to how Bungoma works. They know when they come to Hlola, there's no confusion. They put the money under the grass mat. It's that you go. When you tell them certain rituals, they already understand the importance of those rituals. But coming back into the city, into the practice, I identified that a lot of people were actually seeking to then come and benefit from Ubungoma in terms of the healing. But there was a gap around understanding Isintu or Sicho, Wabona, of actually that is the mother or the mother body of Ubungoma. So it made it difficult for them to find true healing. So Uguloza was initially, when I started it, around addressing the disconnect of millennials, because even when I went to Twasa, the reason I stayed for so long, and I stayed for a year and 2 months, I was willing to even stay longer, is because I had absolutely no idea Guti Bandu Baphila njani in an indigenous way. The only framework and reference of living I had was a suburban Western way, and a township type of way of living, which also emulates, more of your African American way of living, which was also very much westernized, if we could put it like that. So getting to get into the space and understand things like the importance of cooking and the difference of cooking on a fire. Because when I started cooking on a fire, I couldn't stand the fire. I would always tear up. And all they said was that you'll get used to it. And lo and behold, I learned things such as ugulusa inkomo, which is herding cows and cattle, and seeing the benefits that it has in terms of a meditative space when you go out and you do all of those things. I learned how to farm and to eat off of the land. I learned how to kusinza ka Sesotho ba re ke go rita. It's basically to use the cow dung to basically create a floor, and the importance of how that helps with even just your health and everything. So all of those indigenous ways and all of those practices are indigenous technologies and indigenous sciences that we don't understand, right down to the basics of waking up in the morning and being the first person to wake up and starting to sweep the yard and being barefoot, because that is earthing, that is grounding, that is connecting. And all of those necessarily do not have to do with khubangaka. It has to do with being mutu omuntu and the practices that we naturally had as Batu Babantu that we have then disconnected with. So Uguloza is essentially around that and addressing that gap of how through the past systems that have happened, how we can centric ways to live in. That's why we have programs such as hiking. So when we go hiking, you go tabbing and it's just fun times and we're walking up the mountain, but we're actually decolonizing and demystifying the understanding of how our ancestors connected with nature. And that's around teaching people as to what is the importance of going out into nature from an indigenous perspective. It's around understanding what our ancestors actually learned everything and their healing from observing nature. That's what I learned during Ipetlo, is that initiating in the rural villages, I learned that there's a different way of living and a different totally different system as to how people live. And from observing also what was always the assumption of Guti Kaya is backwards and in, the people there are strong, they are healthy. I mean, in all honesty, I always say to myself, oh my God, the hottest men are in the villages and the most beautiful people, because naturally the way they live is in a holistic way where they connect on a mind, body, spirit just through their activities. So that is where I saw then the gap for Ugudloza to come into the space, is to basically start to preserve indigenous knowledge systems such as technologies and practices by starting to in certain ways speak about them and promote them, which is part of the work that I do on the mainstream media, is that as I often speak around indigenous knowledge and the importance thereof and how it is that it can be used for contemporary solutions to living issues. Secondly, it's also to teach. How in the Western sense that we've been educated. So there are teaching programs that we run at Ugudloza, which are in-house, that center around themes such as the current themes we have is Ubizo, an intimate guide to understanding your calling. It is another offering of ancestry, genealogy, and identity, which has to do with reconnecting with your with basically your identity and understanding your Africanness. and then the divine feminine, which has to do with the understanding of the importance of the mother, the importance of the divine feminine for both females and male within our society and our context as a response to the patriarchal society that we're in. And then also Ugudloza partners with other people. Currently, I'm running a program called Umama Wetu, which is a collaboration between two certified psychologists who are also into mindfulness and are yoga teachers, and it's around inside out social justice, incorporating inside all of that. So basically, in my educational work, I always find spaces where I collaborate with certain institutions around an indigenous approach or an indigenous perspective on all of the issues that exist, because there is indigenous knowledge that comes with every single faculty or profession that's there, whether it's law, whether it's math, whether it's sociology, whether it's history. There was always a way within which we approached it in the indigenous, and people that still approach it in that way. And then also the next part of Ugudloza is the connection part, the actual activities. So the activities incorporate things such as hikes. They incorporate one-day retreats, and actually retreats then that go over a period of time. And the importance of those retreats is to be able to go to the natural spaces, to connect and to learn while you're actually in the space, to have an experiential learning of what it means. And then the last aspect of Ugudloza is then consulting with people that are looking for Afrocentric ways in their own personal brands, as to how it is that they can incorporate indigenous knowledge systems, looking then at institutions or companies and organizations that are looking into institutions. Currently, there are 3 projects that I'm working on. One has to do with employee assistance programs and finding indigenous approaches to employee assistance programs. And this is all just from indigenous knowledge systems. Yes, there is experience that I have of using my gift to be able to see better, but it's from IKS, the mother body of it. So that's essentially what Ugudloza does. And then I then practice as Gogo Khanyakude, as Sangoma, and as Inyanga, and as Gobela.
That sounds amazing, and congratulations for being able to have that vision and for the follow through to be able to materialize. Because a lot of us can have dreams, but we don't necessarily make them a reality because of the aspect of fear and not being, or perhaps being without resources. So kudos to you and your team for not allowing the barriers to determine how far you go with the dreams that you've been given in your lives.
I think what is important around dreams as an African child is to realize that it's not easy for any of us, even those coming from privilege, especially the moment you want to do anything that has to do with straight up Blackness and things of Africanness. So it won't be so easy to walk up to the bank to find financing. Won't be so easy to find people that will want to invest in what you're doing. Even your own African people will not be able to see the feasibility or the economic gain that could be seen from that. They may believe in it, but they don't think that indigenous knowledge or even Bungoma is something that is worth investing in financially. So when it comes to the follow through of your dreams, it's important to understand that you can't rush in the same way as somebody who is doing something that is mainstream and modern, because that's the system within which we we live within. So certain things of ours take more time. I'm sure for you to get to where you were, if you were doing something that was more generally acceptable in society, you would have been much, 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 much further. And so it requires a lot of perseverance, it requires a lot of dedication, and it actually requires for it to be something you believe in, not something that you're doing just for financial gain. Because if you're doing it for financial gain, you will cry, because you invest a lot from what you could be using for other things. I mean, we are two young healers. I think there's a 2-year age gap between you and I. You're 32, I'm 30. We want to be also going to Bali. We want to be going to all of these exotic locations. But the reality of the matter is that you cannot necessarily be investing in that because you don't have the equal amount of access to the mainstream systems of support. So what you then do is that you push your work and then you reinvest. But it's also similar to any sort of business model. In business, you don't expect to start seeing big profits within the first 10 years. So it's around sacrifice, it's around believing in your dream, but understanding that it is much harder when it comes to the African dream, because that's just how the system is set up. And you push from there.
Certainly. I mean, like if you and I go to a bank and we say that our occupation is a Sangoma, they won't see us worth investing in. They're going to ask for bank statements to prove that. But if you work in a very traditional sense, all your offerings come in cash. So how can that be proven? Yet you are one of the most busiest people even in your whole neighborhood. You are contending with the big guys in terms of the amount of money that you can raise with the work that you do. But the institutions are not here to be supporting of things that they don't believe in. So you're absolutely right with what you're talking about. I'd like to ask you about your 7 years in the industry of Ubungoma as a Muntu Twasile. How do you bring healing to yourself?
For me, angaze what I was taught ektwasin is forever and for always a twasa. So something is not sitting well with me, is not going right, I will go into trance. I will vuka madloti, because I understand the fact of that going into trance and kuhlehla, that channeling is actually a scientific way that spirit modulates certain energies. If you're really, really, really angry and you're really, really worked up, and then your ancestral spirit evokes, in that moment, all of that rage will be expressed. And when you come back from the primeval waters or elwandle labangoma, you come back feeling so much better. So that is always my first port of call when it comes to emotional things that overwhelm me, is that I've never allowed for myself to get to the point where I believe that trance is something that no longer has a purpose, because I always make sure that I maintain the connection with my ancestors. Secondly, in order to avoid confusion, I don't do ngena puma. And when I speak about ngena puma, it is important to collaborate and to have friends because there's unity in diversity. But the moment there is something spiritual that is affecting you as someone lotwasile, and you train yourself from an early on stage that you're going to go from person to person to person to person to person seeking for a solution, what then happens is that you break down your own spiritual confidence as a person, but also what you're communicating to your ancestors is that you ain't shit. If you pardon the French, is that you do not believe in the fact that they can actually give you solutions, because often that is the problem that people have in their journey, is that you've just come back, you just start to see your first challenge and you want to make it into a huge catastrophe. You'll be coming to Gogo Moyo, you'll be coming to Gogo Khanyakude, you'll be going to Gogo Nomi, you'll be going to Siskuku, you'll be... And it's life. Life happens to all of us. And I think that's the third aspect, is that the realization that just because Ntwasile doesn't absolve me from life happening to me. It doesn't mean that I will not get ill. Doesn't mean that I will not get punked by certain people or get played. I am still human. I remain human. And you may find that the more I stick to the idea that because I have now twasad, I am now superhuman, my ancestors and spirit will bring in more experiences where I actually experience the opposite of it so that I can actually connect, because that's what also we're taught during initiation. Ukuthi you must have a humility, ubunvu. And if it is about butu, and when all of a sudden you think, Khuri, by the blood of the goat, you are superhuman, spirit will humble you and they will show you. So I'm a very sober-minded person. I also understand that it's important to have close relationships with your family around your spirituality. If you do not develop a close relationship with your family where you can speak about almost any and everything as someone who is spiritual, it means that even nanoma sokhuluma nelodi, because your family are living ancestors and labo bathwasile are those who are on the other side. So those ancestors, in order for them to flow, there must be an open relationship between both the living and the past ancestors. So I'm not saying that all of us have the same kind of family backgrounds, but there must be a certain level of honesty that exists even in families where you find that your family rejects your calling. You must be able to communicate the things that spirit sends and reveals to you, because then you have done your job. And that's the other dimension, is that once it's Aktwasa, we want to cherry pick what we want to do in our callings. We just want to focus on the fruit, and then we forget about the whole tree. You will stop doing certain practices and start saying, Elami Lozi doesn't want this, Elami Lozi in. But that is spiritual bypassing. So I think the most important thing for me in my journey has always been the fact that I always say to people that I am such a Lozi nerd. I love Madodi. There's nothing for me that is as heavenly as going somewhere and doing Ntwaso and it's kupu, siakala, and it's singing, and I come back from there and I'm reinvigorated. When I think about my journey, I don't think about what my ancestors have taken away, because also your state of mind is the most, I think, crucial, is that a lot of people have this understanding when they speak about Gutwasa Wabo Guti. If I hadn't twasad, my ancestors, took me away from doing this, I could have been doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and what. And that's what starts to also create certain mental issues and anxieties within you as a healer. And it creates certain traumas that exist that you will then express in your healing practice. Because if you cannot understand why it is that your calling has come to you and is truly a gift, and you're still holding on to I could have, should have, would have, it means that there's a certain part of you that still remains unhealed. So even in your healing, there's going to be parts of it that is compromised, and the longer you hold on to that, the more it will create mind, body, and even physical issues.
I mean, absolute agreement. And I think that the part where you spoke about choosing what gifts to use versus what is more comfortable for you, it's so very limiting, because just which one am I going to use? Especially a lot of healers in Joburg, in Gauteng, when you speak about the conversation of Mufembo, but uthasumunda yebo bakufundisile ishoba yebo, and like manje why umndawo akhanga sebenzi umungunu usebenza kanjani nomunda wakho if umunda wakho awasebenzi. So those are the kind of conversations that we end up finding when we're interacting amongst each other. Why are you so selective of the gifts that you want to use? Yes, they can interchange and when who addresses which issue, but let them be the deciders of which issue they want to tackle. But you can't necessarily be dismissive because it's uncomfortable for you, or it's going to put you, you're going to come back from that experience incredibly tired. That's part of the work that we signed up for. And within each trance that we go into is the healing that you speak about.
And I believe that that's why also I really enjoy doing indigenous knowledge work, and because it teaches you to also decolonize or unpack language and what language means. If utwase umguni is guba Sangoma, being the seer, being the diviner, being the person of song and dance. Uma so utwase nemzawe Inyanga. Yeah, understand that because Umzawe is a person of the water is governed by what? The moon. Inyanga is a month. Inyanga is also the moon. So there needs to be a balance of those two energies. You could basically say Umguni is the sun energy and then Umdawe is the moon energy. So when you focus on the one and you leave behind the other, there's an imbalance within your way of how you have been initiated, if that is how you have been initiated. I mean, I always speak out, maybe not so publicly about it, that there's so many dilutions of what is actually imbanzi yesinguni nesinzawe, because arguably everything has its origins. In the same way as we understand ukuthi Okamaku come from Esxhoseni and Makosi comes from the Zulus, it's also understood that imbanzi yesinguni na yesinzawe, imbanzi that it's abga from Mpumalanga, Eswatini, nase Mozambique. And if you go and you see the vast differences in terms of the practices between here in the city and back there in the villages, and I'm not talking around doing this kind of work, but I'm talking around umsebenzi wasendumbeni. Like you're saying, gufemba is very important. If when you can say that, okay, my Mdawe does not necessarily want me to femba, there is miti yebanzawe that you would then say that I know certain miti that I have been taught by my Mdawe that I use then to femba. But then within even that process, there is still a need for ukuthi Mdawe wako when you are doing that process aphume atohlehla. Because when we say that likamoya, it means that it draws the essences and the spirits which are actually negatively afflicting the person, which is another important thing around ukuhlehla. So it is important that we start to have also these conversations around this also thing of impande yami, but kuthiwa mnguni nemzawu. Because gahle cha makhehla, there's something that is not right within that. When we actually start to sit and look at what the undertone of it is, it means that we are now individualizing Isintu, where it is umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, and kunemthetho welishoba uyakuvisisa. Masihamba, I know you have connections and ancestral roots in Mpumalanga. There's an understanding regardless of the mpande, this is what is going on. But here in the city where you go, even though you will sit and you'll be like, hi, I am so confused. What is going on here? Simple things such as you're taking a twasa home. I understand that when you're taking a twasa home, when umupa umthetho weshoba, it's not just people from your own mpande that do that. You invite bonge bo Gobela to come in and to speak, because it is a communal thing. Because mauletha mngoma, you're not bringing them back to your mpande, you're bringing them back to the community. And the community also includes the community of healers where they're coming back to. But you find now in the city that outside of this individualization, there's a thing of guti gain when I love in as another mngoma who comes from somewhere else in the journey of omunye mngoma. So it creates this thing where now we become afraid to actually speak some of the things that you may see in a certain space, because it's going to be like you're trying to create conflict. And all of those things are the very same things that, if we're honest, they come back to our ndumbas and they will tell you, Gogo's didn't want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And why a lot of people who have actually twasad in the city are the ones that complain around how their initiations went. But those who have roots in the rural villages will have a deeper connection, because or back in outside the city will have a deeper connection to their spirituality. I don't hear Mine or Kamaku really online speaking negatively about the Usigo Lwabo.
Yes.
I don't see Bumakosi Labachamga AKZN speaking badly about their fraternity. There is a pride, there is a unity, there is a community. Autiboni Inyanga that come from deep in Swaziland or Mozambique having that type of thing. But here in the modern spaces, Gobela is a villain. The moment I am done, you are going to turn into my villain.
I want to ask you to please describe for the people watching, in your own words, Guti, what is Mufab?
So, Ugufemba, I think that if we put it in the simplest sense, it's a form of an exorcism on one level. So when I say it's a form of an exorcism, we all walk into some spaces and we will feel that the energy is off at a certain place, or you'll meet somebody and you'll feel as though the aura is not the kind of aura that you bounce with. This has nothing to do with whether you believe in the ancestors or not. This is just general things that we're able to pick up. And there'll be certain, so basically when it comes then within the indigenous or within Ubungoma, we understand that you are able to then, those energies and those auras that you draw from people are actually able to attach to you. Apart from those auras that you may be picking up from people or energies from places, it means at that place there could actually be certain entities or ilwane, as Tine would call it, that are there, which are making you feel like that. And when you are picking up that negative vibration, leso is latching onto you. When you meet someone who has a negative aura and they tire you and they wear you out every time you're around them, it means that there's a certain oral transference, and they may be carrying a certain kind of a darkness within them that exists within them. So also within the world of Bungoma, we understand that Bantu bayatharat, witchcraft is real, because it's a form of alchemy. So through spell work, through many ways of doing, people can actually invoke certain energies and certain negative entities to actually take possession over your life. And these can manifest in different ways. Like you find certain people who say that I have dreams where somebody's always sleeping with me every night and it's the best sex I've ever had. But in real life, then what happens is that dololo mjolo for you, dololo, even when you find someone actually getting to the point where you're sexually active, there's an entity that even biblically they'll call a spiritual husband that is there. So in the exorcism part of it, that's what Ugufemba does. It takes out entities which are not supposed to be in your energetic and your oral space. Yakubona what we'll call isithunzi sakho no moya wakho uyakuvisisa imikhokha lelo idonsa yona. When then we go into the second aspect of Ugufemba. Ugufemba is also a reconnection with your ancestors. And in terms of the reconnection with your ancestors, it means that if there's certain ancestors that are in your family that perhaps have certain unresolved issues or have messages that they'd like to pass on, when that person who is in trance is going through the process of Ugufemba, those ancestors will be able to channel through them. So then that person becomes a medium. They become a conduit of that spirit. And then those ancestors are able to then communicate with you in real time to pass on messages, to maybe complain about certain things, or to actually give guidance around certain things. And if you have a calling, it's also then maybe if they are stubborn to reveal themselves, to then also then reveal themselves and reveal as to where your direction is supposed to be. So that's the second purpose of Ugufemba. In the third purpose of Ugufemba, it's almost as though it's a crystal ball.
Yeah.
So the people that are behind doing the things, or the sources of where all of these negative energies, which then cause misalignment of your life, come from, will then channel and evoke in that person. So if utsagatswa ngimi as Gogo Khanyakude, as you guys can see, I speak a lot with my hands. I have a certain kind of a sound vibration to my voice and the way in which I speak. So that person would then essentially go in and they would mimic the way within which I behave. And you, as the person who's being fembad, or it's always advised that you also go with those who are close to you and family members who know your life, will then identify who the person is. So then that person, while in that moment, it is not the physical person who is manifesting there. It is the astral part or the spiritual part that is manifesting there, will then be asked to then be able to come and bring healing and to take out the seed that has been planted by me, if it is I, Gogo Khanyakude, that has come out in that. Also, as a fourth thing that people do not understand, Ugufemba is like generally going for service.
Yes.
It is literally going for service. That's why in Chindawe they will say Yikutswairo or Ukshanyela, Hufiela. It's sweeping off the dirt that may just exist even within you yourself as a person. That is why when the shoba is used, it goes all over your body, and there are certain mistis and incenses that are there. So it's a holistic process that is not just about the external, is not just about connecting to the ancestors, is not just about seeing your enemies or people who are doing things that are negative to you, but it's also an ability to cleanse you holistically so that you align within yourself. Because that is what Umzawe is. It represents the water energy, and the water energy is one that is supposed to come and cleanse. That's why even when you speak, it's basisa itindlela tabona. It's make it pure. It's a purifying act. Togoza Gogo.
That was so beautifully put. One of my last questions for you is from a person Ochase Emakaya and now also living in a suburban environment where you are surrounded by a lot of Western culture and modern. My question to you is, what have you found, according to your observation, when it comes to the pricing of servicing ubuhlola, even for particular rituals and ceremonies. How have you found the difference between the two different places that you have grown up in and when it comes to pricing ebunyangeni?
I think when it actually comes to pricing ebunyangeni, we in the city are still, or in the modern space, are still very much kind and considerate. Yes. Because even nanyalo mauhamba we are in Makaya, I mean, we all twasa. Let me start from there. We all twasa, mas twasa mnguni city. Nabambanzi bangoma konke maguma mana lomhlaba ngidumisa imbanzi lengikhulisile. So the idea of udumo is a very important one, because even in our phahla, even when the ancestors come out, is ngidumisa imbanzi lengikhulisile. So what happens in Makaya is that the more renowned ukduma is being renowned that a healer is, the more prestigious the pricing also becomes. It's not necessarily true for every healer, because some people are governed by their ancestors, but that's what generally becomes the case, is that you will go to someone, and if they have 100 people queuing outside, some will take the format of, I'm going to hlola all those 100 people at 150. We'll give them 15,000 rand at the end of the day. Lomunye will just tell you straight up, what's mean my hlola, like somebody Emakaya's hlolas for around 500 rand. Yes. You understand? There are those that then go in and they do umhlashi, they hlola even for 1,000 rand. Yes. And then when it comes to healing, you'll get then someone will tell you that for me to femba you first, it is this amount. And femba is the first step. Secondly, I need to go cleanse you. To cleanse you is this amount. Then after cleansing you, you have at the river, I have to put you through certain steaming processes and certain fortifying processes. And that is this amount. And they'll tell you, Guti, that is waka umundu, or fortifying a whole person, or healing holistically. And they will tell you, Guti, that is something close to 10,000 rand, because it works on all aspects of life, from umuthi omnyama, the darknesses that may be there, to then healing you ngemitebo, which has to do with blood illnesses or things of the blood, to going right up to imite mhlophe, which has to do with your light and drawing all of those essences, and they will charge you those amounts. And that's just simply how it goes down. So we in the city, because people have a lot of mouth and they will talk a lot on social media, I find sometimes that people will complain around the fact that my consultation is 450, but I'll sit and I'll be like, but 450, and firstly, I don't consult the way I consult Emakaya, because Emakaya, all I need to do, I tell you, you have come today, there's a child that's sick. That child being sick, you want to find out whether it's something that has to do with traditional things or needs a Western doctor. It is something traditional. What is the cause of it? XYZ. What is the solution? This is the solution. How much does it cost? That. Finished. Done. You give me my money. But here in the city, you must walk through every single step. You must explain certain things. And it takes what could take a consultation of, we would have 10-minute consultations, 15 minutes consultations during my Twasa period. Now we have consultations for a whole hour. And that's the difference around what I was saying in the knowledge gap of Isintu. So in a lot of our pricing, people do not consider also the time and the investment that also goes over and above. And also the fact that our overheads in the city are so much more than they are in Makaya. For you and I, it's not like when I'm back home. When I'm back home, just the mountain is right there. there are so many variants. All I need to do is to take a second to walk up the mountain, because Mpumalanga is rich in imiti. Lana, it's either you're going to buy it from Faraday or you're getting transport and you're traveling to that place. And it's all of those kinds of things that make it sort of difficult. But I think that what would be important would be for us to start to actually get a certain kind of a regulation where we have a standardized pricing. Because I mean, when you look at our sister or our brother fraternities, doctors have, if you're a GP and you understand that you work with general things, it could be anything from 450 going right up to 700, 800 rand. Once you start having a certain speciality, it's from 1,000 rand going up to so many other things. And we often have to divine, which is ukuhlola, tell you the things which are unseen. We often then have to go into the space where we counsel people. And then we also have to go into the space where we also then become educators to people in the city space. So there are so many more dimensions to our practice. And that really should start to influence the price. But we don't also want to alienate people to where you'll suddenly be saying, my consultation is 850 rand, because we must also be conscious of the fact that it's not everyone who can afford that. So then what it becomes is it becomes similar to Western medicine, where only your elite can afford the best healthcare, and then everybody else is left, to public service. Because I truly believe that as healers, even though we are not recognized, Tina, that they call Gogo Dumo, we are immensely gifted. Otherwise, our ancestors would not be putting us at the forefront of what is going on. And though people may not recognize and see it, but there is something that is magical about each and every one of us, because the reason we go to Twasa is because our ancestors want their names to become known and to become remembered. And the fact that you can Google Gogo Moyo, you're on Google, you're forever going to be cemented in history. It means that your ancestors will never ever be forgotten. So there's something really, really magical about your healing. And at some point we need to start to be recognized, but at the same time it is not a business, because spirit, as things go, really does provide.
Yes. You said that so beautifully. I want to know about you on a personal level. What is your favorite element?
What is my favorite element? I believe that I would say sound. And sound. which would be air.
Yeah.
Yes, it's air, because sound moves through the air currents. I love to dance.
We know.
I really I sometimes have to hold myself back, and I'm like, you can't post such videos, because there's also this prejudice and stigma that's around. How Gogo Khanyakude, you are doing this, you are like this. So there's that, but I must be honest, is that for me, sound is what led me to Twasa, because for the 5 years between when I finished matric in 2013, all I wanted to do was to dance. When I was ektwaseni, my Gogo Madodini would always say, you Gogo, uthwasela ukuthi uyoba inyanga yemgitso wena uthanda kugitsa kwakho nje kuyoba kugitsa kuphela. And even just coming out, nothing makes me happier than the idea of waking up and discovering a sound. It takes over all of me. There's a certain kind of movement that just really goes, and it is air. It's the essence of air. And I think that I would have said initially that it's water, because water is also very much essential dancing sort of energy. And the way I move is very much to the rhythm of the water.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, I can live without going to the water maybe for even 3 months, but I could never live without listening to good music every day.
Those are actually amazing elements that you've chosen. I certainly agree with you on the sound as well as the water. Can you tell me, what is the biggest lesson that you have ever learned in the 7 years that you have heeded your call?
I think my biggest lesson has been in this year of Corona. And what the lesson has been literally is to really stop obsessing around wanting to understand spiritual principalities, the way spirit works, being obsessed around what is going on in the ancestral space, and focusing and watching and manning my lane. I am the vessel. I am the living being. My purpose is to be able to work and watch what is going on in this world and not worry about the spiritual world. And it's not to say that when I say not to worry, it means that completely disregarded. But what it means is that often what happens is that we become so far removed from the physical world and we obsess so much about the spiritual world that we start to disconnect, and certain things of ours, even our dreams, misalign because we are not connected to the earth where we're living, when what our calling is supposed to do is to make us feel more alive, to make us feel more grounded in, and to inspire us to do more than what our ancestors have done before. So that has been, I think, my biggest lesson through a lot of the experiences that have happened to me this year, because I would share and go into it, but Lana, people are funny and they whatever, but what I'll generally share is just that I've had to really reconnect with my physical self and connect with the things that to me, and not always define everything as my ancestors require this, but understanding that there's an equilateral relationship, and that when it's equilateral, it doesn't mean that because we're on equal footing with my ancestors that we are the same size. No. They always remain above me. I mean, they could literally just decide that, oh, okay, you think you're smart, let's just waste all of your life, because time to them is nothing. It's a figment of the imagination. What to you would feel like 20 years, to them being on the other side is like, that's nothing, because they're forever going to be there. And so what the reconnection with my physical self has done is that to focus and understand that I only have so much time here, and to understand the spiritual world and the spiritual principalities, I will transcend as well, and I will become an ancestor. And even there, I will start to go through certain kinds of initiation, and which is something that I learned through my ancestral development, is that I realized that the people I walk with are not all at the same place spiritually, even though they are in the same spiritual plane. There's my one of my good friends, Tato, always speaks that and then there's the ancient ones. And then understanding that there's a soul journey that will always be done, so that they are also doing work. So Nami, let me actually do the work that is important here. And even though it may be understood as people as being materialistic or chasing things which do not align with spirituality, but that is my job, to set up my ancestors to be in the most comfortable position, to be in the most prestigious position. And because we do not twasa to descend, we twasa to elevate, we twasa to actually find our glory and to find our feeling of liberation and emancipation when we had been repressed for so long as an African people.
You know, for you to say something like that, it also speaks of how very connected you are to your calling, how much of it you actually accepted, and how much of it you truly live it in your life. And thank you so much for sitting with us today and allowing us your time and sharing the vast amount of knowledge that you have. I wish Ubudoza and yourself all the prosperity in the world. May you really, really get to ticking all the boxes that you've ever had for yourself in terms of identifying what it is that you want to achieve in the world. Nyakubonga Gogo, I really, really appreciate you. Even on the timeline, I'm not shy to show you love. So I'm not just saying this Nyakubonga Gogo, sabonga Gogo Khanyakude.
Sibongile Gogo Moyo, Sibongile Rosie Queen King, and forever and for always. I really hope that this is something that will inspire other healers for us to start to build a community. We don't have to be personal friends, but we need to at least be spiritual, to be spiritual allies and to be friendly on a spiritual level, because that is the next level of healing that I believe we as healers need to start transcending, is coming together so that we can see how we can actually start to shift things in society, because we can't do things in isolation.
There's no way. Now if that's possible, but that wasn't possible because you needed aid.
Gunjalo, everything in our life is that I think once we get to the understanding, there is nothing that you can ever say you are grateful to yourself, because everything always has something to do with somebody who's had some sort of role. Even if you're going to go buy yourself a car, there are people that are involved in facilitating that. So that is the biggest lesson of Ubuntu that I feel needs to return to us as healers. And I love the idea of cultivating such spaces where we can have these conversations, so that even to the younger generation of healers that are coming, they can see that there's unity in diversity and there's an acceleration.
We are the examples that they need to see. So which is then they'll know that it's not impossible. And that's what's broken about our industry, is how everyone is feeling like what they're doing is better and better than ARCO. Like we like to grade a lot of things, but we don't actually realize we're doing the very same thing. And thank you for allowing me to be on the Lesedi podcast today.
Gogo, you must have a beautiful time, and I wish this journey of yours to flourish, much like everything you have such green hands.
Wow, now wasn't that something? Did you notice how much Gogo had a wealth of knowledge to share? I particularly loved the personal accounts that he shared, because it speaks to the truth of a spiritual journey. Yes, there's similarities. Some paths we walk with other people, but in the most right of things, you have to allow your spirit to speak further and louder than any other voice in the room. I'd like to challenge you today to look at your own story and notice how you may start as a collective, but as you journey, you fall off, you pick different things, you get attuned to different things, and ultimately that's what brings your silver lining. It brings out the essence of the energy of your calling. Thank you for tuning in today, and if you are new to the channel, please remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any of our exciting videos. I have been your host today, Thokozani.